Here we have a marvelous story of the Transfiguration. But what is, still, after all this, what does God look like? My atheist friends have difficulty imagining God whom they cannot see or hear. And even fellow churchgoers have their moments of doubt when God seems distant and inattentive. My own experience of God has been like that of an ant's breath against a stone mountain of feeble resistance to immovable majesty. Christians and other people of faith through the ages have tried to describe God's glory and God's power and God's infinity and God's mercy and God's love. And every description and every analogy comes up short because our language and imagination is too limited to express all that is God. And so to my atheist friends, I have no words to explain or describe that will enlighten them. Peter and James and John were the only few to catch a glimpse and to hear God's voice. Moses and Elijah before them. But for all of them, seeing a glimpse of God, we read, they were terrified. I'm not so sure I want to see God. The terror of so great a majesty is something I can do without. But people throughout the ages attempt to mitigate this terror. Terrible things happen, terrible things are about to occur, and just before the terrifying transfiguration, Jesus tells of suffering and rejection and betrayal and violent death, horror heaped on terror. Some have tried to mitigate the passion told. Some have tried to soften the story. Some have read the gospel story of Jesus as great drama, of Jesus seen as a tragic leader, misunderstood and naive and holy and good, and suffering injustice like all those too good for this world. And the horror unfolding upon Jesus' classic tragedy of great leader crushed by wrong. If we read the gospel story as Jesus being a very good person, we get great drama, a good story told. A good story has a good ending. Jesus rises, the story ends, and everyone goes about their business. The end. Others read the gospel stories of Jesus as heroic epic. Jesus as divine God come to war with mythic demons, cosmic battle of gods and titans, above human insignificance and pathetic lives. We get great heroic epic of God tampering with humans throughout the eons and finally showing up in person to stir up action. A great heroic epic of mythology. And as epic, God is so removed from human cares that our miserable lives deserve scarce thought. But the transfiguration of Jesus culminates not tragic drama and not heroic epic. The transfiguration of Jesus tells something else. The transfiguration is that of God so in love with this world that God desires to abide with us, close and intimate, loving. We read of a passionate God who wants to know us so intimately that God becomes a fellow human to this limited life. Jesus transformed reminds us that Jesus is no mere human brother, but his divine holiness in all its purity and splendor. But it is no mythic epic of God's meddling. It is a story of the one true God passionately loving us and this creation and all of its struggles and joys and strivings. Elijah, the greatest of the prophets, was raptured up in a great whirlwind of chariots. And Moses, the giver of God's law, leader of a nation through 40 years of wandering, watched from afar, was never seen again. Both esteemed and glorified, never facing demise of death. But Jesus. Moses and Elijah disappeared. Only Jesus is left standing. And this Jesus is different. Jesus will be insulted and whipped and disparaged and scorned and tortured and very publicly executed at the hands of violent, vicious men. Jesus is different. God is doing something new. God joins the worst of this corrupt creation. And God endures the worst of human atrocity. And God is doing something new. And God joins our life and bears with us through our darkest times and remains with us out of love. Another characteristic of God that comes through in this gospel reading is that of God abiding with. Jesus goes with them to Caesarea Philippi. Jesus goes with them on the way. Jesus goes with them up the mountain. Jesus goes with them down the mountain. Jesus goes with them to Jerusalem. Jesus goes with them to the cross. Jesus goes with. When evil attempts to stop death, Jesus goes on ahead to prepare a place for all. When Jesus returns to his beloved and appears, even when Jesus ascends to heaven, Jesus' Holy Spirit is still with. God abides. God tarries with. And God waits with until we are ready to see and believe.